Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Hi, I'm Beth Parker, and I thank you for joining us on Ethical Perspectives. This evening, we will focus on Iowa perspectives of education. Looking behind the scenes with Ethical Perspectives, our listening audience would not otherwise know that on the Monday prior to the broadcast taping, we panelists, technicians, and producers gathered to discuss the presentation and settle technical logistics. What became clear from last night's rehearsal is that our panelists have very distinct views regarding the path forward for Iowa students. With that in mind, one very specific goal of this episode is the articulation of these positions, the provision of a springboard from which you, dear audience, can identify and support the position of your choice. Don't forget to let your position be known to your legislators. That said, I ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and say a few words about their organizations and positions, the why of why they are joining us tonight. Don't be shy.
Well, I can start. My name is Lisa Bartusek, and I'm Executive Director at the Iowa Association of School Boards. The School Boards Association in your state, we represent the more than 1,800 locally elected volunteers who serve on the public school boards of the state for 327 school districts. We're a private, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We're based in Des Moines, and we provide training and support to public schools and school boards and advocate on their behalf.
I'm Trish Wilger. I'm the Executive Director of Iowa Alliance for Choice in Education. We're the statewide organization supporting parental choice in education, sometimes called school choice. We're also nonprofit and nonpartisan, and we believe that every Iowa parent should be able to access and afford the type of education that best meets their child's needs, whether that's public, non-public, virtual, or homeschool. And we do educational and advocacy work on behalf of Iowa parents and school choice around the state.
Hi, my name's Sally Schaab, and at this present time, I'm a trainer with the Cedar Rapids Community School District. I'm also a strong advocate for our children in school. My children, my grandchildren, and now my great-grandchildren will be attending schools in Iowa. So I have a great interest in what direction our school system goes.
Thank you all, and thank you for being here with us. So the legislation of topic is SF 159. Let's start there. So panelists, please just speak up, join in the conversation. What are the specifics of the proposal before the Iowa legislature? What is the gist of SF 159? Lisa, would you like to start? Or, yeah.
I will, and I'll encourage Trish, please help chime in with what I miss. But Senate File 159 is also known as Governor Reynolds' Education Omnibus Bill. An omnibus bill just means a lot of different elements are included in that bill. And it includes 8 divisions. The one we're talking about tonight is called Division 1, and it relates to what we refer to as vouchers. But in the bill, they're called Students First Scholarships. And it essentially provides legislation that would allow parents in 34 public school buildings across the state to withdraw their children from public school and enroll them in a private school, or to homeschool them, and or to hire tutors, other eligible expenditures, and to be funded for that with up to $5,400 that would go into an account administered by the State Department of Education for their use. Trish, what did I miss?
I think you covered it well, Lisa. I think that's the main part we're focusing on. There's other parts of that bill that focus on open enrollment issues and charter schools as well. So some of that legislation is also still being heard at the legislature, but I think you covered the details on the Student First Scholarship Program well.
Sally, any comment, or should we move on?
The only comment is the legislature tried to do this back in 2015, 2016. Everyone thought that it was going to pass at that time, and it did not. I think they're revisiting now, mainly because of COVID and because of the schools being closed. Not so much here in Iowa. We have had our schools open, but many areas have not. So I think they are just jumping on the bandwagon to try and open things up for parents.
So,
Beth,
yes.
I did think of one thing we should add. Senate File 159 did pass the Senate in late January. The companion bill, they approached it a little differently in the House of Representatives. That bill has not passed out of committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. A stated advantage of the pro-voucher ESA perspective is parental choice. Can you clarify that position? Dig in and tell us what criterion are parents using to determine school selection, and what systems will advise parents of their options? How do they know what's available? How will they know?
Well, I can jump in there, and ESAs, education savings accounts, they're a little different than vouchers, but they are designed to give parents the option to choose something other than their assigned local public school, if that's what they wish to do. So some parents, we have great public schools in Iowa. We have great non-public schools. It's just a matter of finding what works best for your child. And I think parents know their children better than anyone and should be in the driver's seat when it comes to that choice. So these programs are designed to do that. Some programs or some parents might want, they feel that their public school has better academics and offerings than another school. Some parents might think a non-public option might serve their child better. So I think it's a very personal decision to each family, and one might matter to one, is not a high priority to others. But things like class size come into play, I think, for a lot of parents. Some parents want that faith-based aspect that's important to them, to have that included somewhat during the school day. For others, it might be the academic programs, specific curriculum that are offered at a particular school, whether public or private, that would make them feel that choice is best for their child.
Lisa, anything you wanted to add or share?
Well, I would certainly say that every person I've met, worked with in countless years who served on a school board or works in a public school would agree that parents know their children best, and their involvement in their child's education is so important. Fundamentally, though, we have to look beyond, and we do, that concept of parent choice and ask, is this the right public policy for Iowa? And we do oppose this bill for a couple of important reasons. One, we believe public funds should go to schools that are open and accessible to all students, regardless of their religion, their gender, their race, their disability, their family income. And public schools are open to all those students and serve them all. Private schools are not held to that standard, and that's fine. They're private schools. They may choose to exclude students based on religion or just their ability to serve them. So the choice is really with the school, and we don't believe that's the appropriate use of public funds. And the second aspect is transparency. Public schools are required to be transparent with the public, who invest that money in them. Open meetings, public records, reporting on student outcome data, and private schools are not held to that standard. And for those two major reasons, we oppose this bill.
Just one other aspect as far as choosing a school. Many parents sometimes choose school because of the athletics. And if they are wanting their child to be a good football player, they may choose a school that has a better record of playing football. A lot of factors go into what parents want for their child or want for themselves. So there's a lot of things that happen in choosing what school you put your children into.
So let me clarify the categories, make sure I understand the choices that are available to parents. Are there any in all private schools? Are there religious schools, home schools, military schools, public schools? Are there limitations to the places that parents can select?
Well, it depends on the design of the program, and there's a lot of options out there, and there's options in other states that we may not have here in Iowa. So it's really depends on the program design. For example, there's education savings accounts where parents receive a portion of funds and they can use that for different options for education. Those are existing in 5 other states now. There's voucher programs like in Milwaukee. I think those are in about 20 states now. There's a tax credit program. Like in Iowa, we have a school tuition organization program, tax credit, where private donations go in to help lower income kids afford non-public school. But it depends on the design of the program. In other states, there are programs, education savings accounts for special needs students. There's some for foster students, and it depends on the design of the program for what options would be available. And under the governor's bill, the options are accredited non-public schools. So those schools are either are accredited by the state or by an independent accrediting agency that's approved by the state.
So let's talk a little about how the spending is assigned or awarded, and by whom, and more generally, what is the impact on the taxpayer? And another question that has come up about, is there a mismatch between the voucher ESA and tuitions or fees? So will these vouchers cover the expenses for the program that the parents select?
Well, that was like 4 questions in one, Beth.
Okay.
So the first one you said was who assigns the funds?
Yeah.
Yep.
How are they?
So that's designated in the bill. And like I said, the current allocation of funds, it's based on the complicated school funding formula in Iowa. But the estimate is $5,400 per student whose family withdraws them from one of those 34 public schools. And those funds would be administered by the Department of Education in account set up for that family, that child, which their parents could administer. And then the parents have, there are designated allocations or appropriate uses, such as private school tuition or the expenses that the parent has for homeschooling as examples. So that was the first question. Tell us again your additional questions.
Well, I kind of skipped over to the impact on taxpayers, but related to your first statement, the question would be about a mismatch between the voucher allowance and the tuition due.
The Legislative Service Agency estimated, I think, the private school tuition in Iowa at an average of $3,400 per year. I think that's right, but it varies greatly from my own research, and it depends on the school.
Yeah, I would say for the majority, if not all, the kindergarten through 8th grade especially, it would cover that. The tuitions are below that $5,400 estimate that Lisa was talking about. For some of the high schools, it could be higher than that amount.
So Trish, I know in one of our earlier conversations, you were mentioning, is this just the rollout that is platforming or the priority for just the beginning of this program, and then it will expand? You mentioned 34 schools or 34.
Right. Under this bill, and there's nothing in the bill expanding it specifically. It covers 34 schools that are called in need of comprehensive support through a federal law, the ESSA law. So the number of schools or which schools are considered to be in need of comprehensive support under that law could change over time. Schools could, their status changes and they're no longer in that. Other ones could be added to it. But other than that, I don't believe there's anything in the bill that expands it or, say in the following year, expands it to any extent other than that.
So forgive me if you answer this question. Is there a cap? Are there students who would like to be involved in this program who will not be able to for one reason or another?
There is not a cap under this one. It's just students who are enrolled in one of those 34 schools or kindergartners who would be assigned to that school.
I think the key for us is that legislators who support this bill are very open in saying they want to expand it in future years. Mm-hmm. So and that is certainly what we've seen in other states. Several other states that have started with very small programs have aggressively expanded it. And Arizona comes to mind. They started I think in 2007 with a program that was small and targeted. And the cost was about $1.9 million that year. And now it's grown to $91 million and is expanding, continues to expand. It is absolutely, I believe, the intent of those who support the use of public funds for private education to expand over time. And that's what we've seen in other states. Again, giving us big pause about the impact on all the families who are in public schools and our ability to maintain high quality public schools to serve them.
So Trish, go ahead, Sally.
I was just, the 34 schools, they're throughout the state of Iowa. Are those 34 schools the ones that are underperforming? That, Iowa did an assessment, and some schools here in Cedar Rapids need to step up and with their testing program, with their teaching. So is that what you're referring to, the 34 schools? It's not just one district, correct?
Yes, the 34 schools are throughout the state.
Right.
And as Trish mentioned, it's the Every Student Succeeds Act is the name of that federal law. And that law is designed to serve, to support public schools with high numbers of students from low-income families. And with that additional support and federal funding comes high expectations for accountability. Those schools need to be very transparent in the goals they set, the results they achieve, and again, public transparency and accountability is a big part of why we oppose this bill, because there is none attached to the schools that would be funded from this. But you can go on iowaschoolperformanceprofiles.org or search in your computer search engine Iowa school report card and come up with that and see every one of the public schools in our state, 1,217 buildings, and their achievement, their graduation rate of high schools, all kinds of data and information is publicly accessible to parents. Not so for private schools. There is no such public accountability and reporting.
Trish, you want to respond to that?
Sure. The accredited non-public schools file a lot of reports with the state through their accreditation process. There's a lot of oversight by the state, and Iowa actually is kind of unique in that way that some other states, probably the majority of them, do not have the oversight by the state on the non-public schools that we do have here. So the non-public schools are held to high standards as well, just as the public schools are.
Is there a board of regents, or what is the governing body that regulates and oversees what's going on? The implementation and the administration and I think we're repeating the question about accountability. Is there potential for abuse? How about a parental accountability, and what management systems, I think is what I'm asking, will enforce this accountability?
Well, in the Student First Scholarship Program, the Department of Education has oversight, and they would be in charge of having audits of the accounts. The way it's designed is that a parent would have kind of a debit card similar to other state programs that would only work at approved vendors, providing educational services so that there wouldn't be fraud or abuse that way. But the Department of Education would have oversight. There would be auditing done at the behest of the Department of Education. And I believe the state treasurer is also involved some there as well. Your question about the Board of Regents, there really isn't an equivalent to that in K-12 education, I guess, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
No, but
At the low,
well,
go ahead.
Just going to say
Sally.
the schools could lose their accreditation if they're found to be falsifying or not performing. They can lose their accreditation and not be accredited in the state.
Lisa, I think you were going to say something.
No, I just want to follow up on what Trish said about the accredited private schools or non-public schools, because I do agree that the state accreditation process is very strong for our private schools in our state. And it covers more of the program requirements, like how many hours of high school English must be offered, or graduation requirements, or teacher licensure. And I think Iowans should be very proud of that, just as they should be very proud of their public schools. Again, the difference is accountability for the outcomes that must be reported, the results publicly available, and then the oversight at the local level of being under the open meetings law, the public records law, and accessible to the public.
So I'm curious about how this program, there's obviously a great variety across the United States. How was this program constructed? Is it modeled after a specific program, or how was it pulled together?
I'm not certain if it's really modeled on, there's other states that grade schools. Florida assigns letter grades and things like that. But I think this is kind of a hybrid of making the eligibility for the program tied to school performance. I think that's kind of a different approach that melds a couple other approaches in other states.
Interesting information. We're kind of winding down. We have a few minutes left. I guess my question would be, how would the systems, can they coexist? Can the public system coexist with the ESA voucher program? What is your perspective about their coexistence, or will they eliminate each other, or what?
I would just, I mean, we have a lot of examples. I think we were talking about this last night, that a lot of communities in Iowa, if not all of them, the public and private school options work together really well. So I don't see that education savings accounts, funding goes to families choose a school. So I don't see that would, upset that balance that is important, especially in smaller communities. We have a lot of public and private school options that work together very well.
And I agree. We talked about that last night. I do think that many communities have a very strong relationship between the public school leaders and the private school leaders. They're all part of the same community, and the kids all grow up in the same community. The concern that we would have is, especially in rural Iowa, where enrollments have been declining and communities are striving to maintain their public school. A public policy that encourages families to withdraw their students from those schools gives great concern to our people who care about rural education.
So, is there a political element to this whole back and forth argument? And if so, how do we abandon politics and put students and families and communities first? And we have about 2 minutes, so please summarize and go ahead and add some information and your final thoughts.
Well, it definitely is a political issue. So I hope our thoughtful and civil discourse here tonight encourages your viewers to think about this and do more research on their own. I think that's the best way we can cut through the politics and take it down to what matters, and that's the children and our Iowa students and families, and keep the focus on them. I think this kind of setting is what we need more of that will help that happen.
15 seconds, Lisa and Sally. 1 minute.
Agreed 100%. This issue does tend to divide on party lines. However, we both work for nonpartisan organizations, and I think that's the benefit of what Iowans care about is education. And when we disagree on how we get the best education for all children, we do so in a civil way.
Well, we may have to revisit this. Obviously, it involves our communities and our students, very important. And perhaps we brought some clarity to the Iowa SF 159 position or discussion, but certainly our audience has a rich vein of resources among our panelists and their organizations. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight and let your legislators know how you feel, and reach out to our panelists if you have questions.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.